All right, buckle up, everyone, because we are diving headfirst into some serious political drama. The Indian Parliament budget session is about to kick off, and let me tell you, it's looking like a real showdown. The clashes, heated debates, major political maneuvering, the whole shebang.
Oh, yeah, the timing here is really interesting. We're not just talking about budgets and numbers. This session is happening right before some really important elections, which means everything that happens here, every debate, every alliance, every little thing, it's all going to be looked at through this lens of how it might affect the elections. Like every move is a calculated gamble.
It's like a high-stakes game of chess
Hmm.
where the players are already thinking 10 moves ahead.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've got these excerpts from an article. It's called Indian Parliament Budget Session, Key Issues and Potential Clashes. Pretty straightforward title. And it lays out all the major points of contention that we're going to break down today. But before we jump into the nitty-gritty, I'm curious, what makes this particular session so potentially explosive?
Well, it's like a perfect storm of different factors. First, you've got the opposition. They're feeling pretty good right now, like they've got some momentum, and they're ready to really challenge the government on all these different fronts. They see this as a chance to grab the narrative, and really gain some ground before the election.
And it sounds like they're going to come out swinging.
Oh, absolutely. And then second, you've got a whole bunch of really controversial issues on the agenda. Like each one of these issues has the potential to just blow up and spark these huge debates.
So it's not just about the usual political back and forth. There's some real heat behind this session.
Right. And then on top of all that, you have this backdrop of societal anxiety, like, economic concerns, social divisions, regional tensions, all of that. And all of that is going to find its way into these parliamentary debates.
So this session is like a microcosm of all the big issues facing India right now.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to put it. This budget session is happening at a really crucial point for India. There's this sense of uncertainty, like the stakes are higher than ever before, and that's going to show up in everything. The intensity of the debates, the kind of political maneuvering that happens, just everything.
Okay, so let's talk about some of those specific issues that are going to be front and center. The article highlights several flashpoints, and I think the Waqf Amendment Bill is a good place to start. Now, for folks who might not be familiar with this, can you explain what the Waqf Bill is all about and why it's causing so much controversy?
Sure. So basically, the Waqf bill is all about changing how Waqf boards are run. These boards, they're responsible for managing religious endowments specifically for the Muslim community. Now, the government is saying that this bill is totally necessary to clean things up, get rid of corruption and make things more efficient. But a lot of people, especially in the opposition, they see this as a power grab, a way for the government to control these institutions and maybe even push out the current Muslim leadership.
So it's not just about administrative efficiency. There are some deeper concerns about religious freedom, political motivations, and maybe even the future of the Muslim community in India.
Yeah, exactly. You hit the nail on the head. This Waqf bill has become this lightning rod for this huge debate about the role of religion in society, the power of the government, and the anxieties of a minority group that feels like it's being targeted.
And this is where it gets really real, right? We're not just talking about some abstract legal changes. We're talking about how this could actually affect the lives and freedoms of millions of people.
100%. And that's why the opposition is ready to fight tooth and nail on this. The NDIA alliance, that's the big coalition of opposition parties, they're going to come together and oppose this bill with everything they've got. They'll use every trick in the book to slow it down, scrutinize every little detail, and try to expose what they see as this hidden agenda behind it.
And it's not just the opposition. Some members of the ruling NDA coalition, like the JDU and TDP, they've hinted that they might support the bill, but only if there are some changes made. Sounds like there might be some cracks in that united front.
Oh, yeah, that adds a whole other layer to this. It tells you that maybe the government doesn't have this in the bag like they thought they did. And it shows just how hard it is for the NDA to keep everyone happy, balance their own goals with the needs of all these different coalition partners.
So we've got this showdown brewing over the Waqf bill. Both sides are digging in their heels, and it's anyone's guess how this will play out, but this is just the tip of the iceberg, right? There are a whole bunch of other issues that are going to be just as explosive, just as consequential.
Oh, for sure. This Waqf bill is just the beginning. We haven't even touched on Manipur, the trade tariffs, all the other things that are going to make this session a real nail-biter.
Yeah. You know what's really interesting to think about? It's how all this stuff is going to actually play out in Parliament. Both sides, the ruling coalition and the opposition, They're already coming up with their game plans, sharpening their arguments and getting ready to rumble. It's kind of like a chess match where everyone's trying to figure out what the other side's going to do and then counter it.
Okay, so let's try to break down their strategies a bit. What can we expect from the Congress and the NDA alliance? What are they likely to do, and what are they hoping to achieve?
Well, the Congress, they've been around forever, right? They know the ins and outs of Parliament like the back of their hand. They're going to use every single tool they've got. One thing we can expect is them using this thing called demands for grants. It's a way for them to basically force discussions on how specific ministries are doing their jobs. Demands for grants. That sounds pretty technical. Can you explain that a bit more? Like for me and everyone listening, break it down so we can really get what that means.
Sure, sure. Think of it like a targeted audit. When the government presents its budget, it divides up the money and gives different chunks to different ministries.
Right.
So the Congress can use these demands for grants to basically zoom in on those ministries, look at how they're spending the money, question whether they're doing a good job, and maybe even uncover some shady stuff or things the government doesn't want people to know about.
Oh, okay. So it's like a way for them to hold the government accountable.
Yeah.
Or maybe put them in a tough spot.
Yeah, exactly. And by focusing on certain ministries, like the ones that deal with foreign affairs or defense or agriculture, they can really grab the public's attention and be like, hey, look, the government is messing this up, or they're not keeping their promises.
So it's about connecting those parliamentary debates to what's happening in the real world and shaping how people see the government.
Yeah, exactly. It's like they're using Parliament to tell a story, a story that either makes the government look good or makes them look bad.
And what about the NDA alliance? What's their approach going to be?
Well, the NDA alliance is this big coalition of all these different parties, right? So they have this advantage of having all sorts of different expertise and viewpoints. They're probably going to attack from all sides, hitting the government on a bunch of different issues at the same time.
So it's kind of like a swarm tactic, just overwhelming the government with criticisms from every direction.
Haha, yeah, that's a good way to put it. And by doing that, creating this huge wave of opposition, they're hoping to keep the government on its toes, expose any weaknesses they might have, and just kind of chip away at their authority. They think that if they all work together, they can shift public opinion and get people on their side.
So it sounds like both sides are coming in with some serious game plans. It's going to be fascinating to see how it all goes down. But let's zoom in a little bit. Out of all these different strategies and tactics, what are some specific things that we should really be watching for? Like, what are the moments that are going to tell us the most about what's happening and that might really shake things up?
Okay, so definitely keep an eye on when they present the budget for Manipur. This is a state that's been through a lot lately with the ethnic clashes and everything, and the way the government decides to spend money there is going to tell us a lot about their priorities.
Yeah. Are they going to focus on security and law enforcement to try to get things under control? Or will they focus more on rebuilding the economy and addressing the root causes of the unrest? It feels like every rupee they allocate is going to be under a microscope.
Exactly. And don't forget, the Home Minister is going to have to try to get Parliament to approve President's rule in Manipur. The opposition is definitely going to jump all over that. We're going to hear from MPs who represent Manipur, and they're going to be sharing their own experiences. And the government and the opposition are going to be telling totally different stories about what's happening. It's probably going to get pretty emotional and heated.
Sounds like it'll be like a courtroom drama playing out in Parliament. Each side presenting their case and trying to convince the jury, which in this case is the Indian public.
Haha, yeah, that's a great way to think about it. And it's not just about who wins the argument, it's about who controls the narrative, who gets to tell the story of what's happening in Manipur and what the government's role in it all is.
And then there's the whole thing with the U.S. trade tariffs. That's sure to be another big showdown.
Oh, yeah. The Congress and the NDA alliance have already said they're going to make this a main issue. They're probably going to demand that Modi explain himself. What's his plan for dealing with these tariffs? How's he going to protect India's interests?
This is where those demands for grants might come into play, right?
Yeah.
They could use that to basically put the Ministry of Commerce and Industry on trial and grill them about their trade policies.
Exactly. They're going to be looking for any mistakes the government made, any signs that they're not doing a good job, and they'll try to paint this picture that the government is either clueless or even worse, that they're putting U.S. interests ahead of India's.
It's a chance for them to play the nationalism card, make it seem like it's India versus the U.S. and the government is choosing the wrong side.
Yeah, for sure. And the government's going to have to figure out how to fight back. They might try to say, hey, we're working on new trade deals. We're trying to make sure these tariffs don't hurt too much, and we're fighting for India. But they're going to be under a lot of pressure to prove that they're standing up for India and not just giving in to the U.S.
Okay, so we've got the Waqf Bill, the Manipur situation, the trade tariffs, all big explosive issues. But what about some of the other things that are simmering beneath the surface? Like we talked about delimitation before. How do you think that's going to play out in Parliament?
Yeah, delimitation, like we said, it's a super sensitive issue, especially in a country like India where there's so much diversity.
Hmm.
M.K. Stalin, the chief minister of Tamil Nadu, he's been really vocal about how the current delimitation process is unfair and how it could really hurt the southern states.
He's not just complaining about it. He's actually going out there and building this coalition of leaders from different regions to fight against it.
Exactly, and that's what makes it so interesting. This has the potential to completely change the political map of India. It could lead to new alliances, power shifts, and it could give regional voices a lot more power on the national stage.
So it's about way more than just drawing lines on a map. It's about who gets to have a say in how India is run.
That's exactly it. And I think the debates in Parliament about this are going to be really intense. People are going to be arguing about representation, about the balance of power between the states and the central government, about the very idea of what Indian democracy means.
And while we're talking about heated debates, we can't forget about the whole Hindi imposition thing and that three-language formula. That's another one that's going to set off some fireworks.
Oh, for sure. The DMK has already said they're going to challenge that three-language formula. Their argument is that it gives Hindi way too much importance and puts other Indian languages at a disadvantage. They see it as a threat to the cultural identity of people who don't speak Hindi.
Yeah, this is about more than just language policy. It taps into these fears that people have about losing their culture, about Hindi being forced on them, about being left out of the national story if they don't speak Hindi.
It's about identity and belonging and recognizing how incredibly diverse India is linguistically and culturally.
And it's something that could really divide Parliament along regional lines. You're going to have people who believe Hindi unites the country going up against people who see it as a threat to their own culture and heritage. It's going to get heated. Now, one more thing we can't forget about is all those allegations about duplicate voter ID cards and the TMC saying there might be voter manipulation going on. That goes right to the core of democracy, and you know the opposition is going to hammer the government on that.
Yep, the TMC is accusing the BJP and the Election Commission of basically being involved in this scheme to mess with the voter lists, and they're demanding a full investigation.
This could really hurt the ruling party. If there's any truth to these allegations, it could make people lose trust in them and make people question if the elections are even fair.
Absolutely. The BJP will probably deny everything and try to make it seem like it's not a big deal. They'll say things like, oh, any duplicate ID cards are just mistakes, nothing intentional, and there's no proof that we're trying to rig anything.
But you know the opposition isn't going to let them get away with that. They'll be looking for any little thing they can use to make the BJP look bad, and they'll try to convince people that the BJP will do whatever it takes to stay in power.
And this whole thing could have some big consequences. It could make people lose faith in elections, make the political divide even worse, and maybe even lead to lawsuits or protests. It's a big deal.
So yeah, I think it's pretty clear now. This budget session is going to be huge. There are so many different issues, so much complexity and so much drama. It's no surprise that everyone's saying this is going to be one for the books.
It's amazing, right? We've just dipped our toes into this budget session, and it's already clear this is going to be a historic one. So much writing on it, not just for the politicians, but for the whole country, for India's future.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. This is way bigger than just political games and scoring points. It's about what kind of country India wants to be, the values it stands for, the direction it's headed. It's a big deal. So as we wrap up our deep dive here, the question that keeps coming back to me is, how will we remember this budget session? Will it be like, wow, that's when they really tackled those tough issues, had some real conversations, actually found some solutions? Or will it just be a mess? You know, everyone fighting, nothing getting done, just making the divisions in the country even worse?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Only time will tell, I guess. But one thing to keep in mind is that it's not like the ending is already written. A lot depends on what these political leaders decide to do in the next few weeks.
Yeah. Will they step up and show some real leadership? Will they be willing to compromise to put the country first? Or will they just fall back into that same old partisan fighting, thinking about the next election instead of what's best for India in the long run?
Well, like most things in politics, I think it'll probably be a bit of both. I'm sure we'll see some moments where people are actually trying to have a real discussion and find common ground. But we'll also see a lot of political posturing, people pushing things to the limit, maybe even just trying to block anything from happening at all.
So it sounds like we should be prepared for a wild ride with some good and some bad.
Yep, that's about right. And I think it's really important for us, as citizens who care about what's going on, to pay attention to what's happening in Parliament, not just get caught up in the drama of it all, but really look at what they're saying, what they're deciding, because those decisions are going to affect all of us.
It's like, when you're thinking about investing your money, you got to read that prospectus carefully before you do anything.
Yeah.
Well, in this case, it's like we're all investing in the future of our democracy, so we got to be just as careful and informed.
Exactly. And that's what we're trying to do here with our deep dive. We're giving you the information you need, explaining what's going on, looking at it from different angles so you can understand how Indian politics works and make your own decisions.
Yeah, we're not just throwing facts at you. We're trying to give you the whole picture, help you make sense of it all.
Because at the end of the day, what happens in Parliament affects you directly. It affects your job, your family, your community. It affects the kind of education your kids get, the health care you have access to, even your basic rights and freedoms.
So as we watch this budget session play out, I think we should all be curious, but we should also take it seriously. Don't be afraid to ask questions, to challenge what you hear, to hold your leaders accountable for what they do.
Yeah, have those conversations even with people who disagree with you. Try to see things from different perspectives. And most importantly, remember that the future of India isn't something that just happens to you. It's something that we all have a role in creating.
This budget session is just one part of a much bigger story, a story that's still being written. And your voice, your choices, they all matter.
So stay informed, stay involved, and don't lose hope. The future of India is in your hands.
Well, this has been fascinating. Thanks for taking this deep dive into Indian politics with me. It's been a real eye-opener, and I think we've all learned a lot. But hey, this is just the beginning. We'll be back with more deep dives, more insights, more perspective to help you make sense of the world. Until then, keep exploring, keep asking questions, stay curious.